Welcome to the ID5 podcast about how to thrive in the cookieless present. I'm Joanna Burton, the Chief Strategy Officer of ID5. For this podcast series, we're talking with a range of experts, sharing their findings and case studies and real results into the use of cookieless technologies. There's so much change in the digital advertising ecosystem with the deprecation of traditional signals used to address advertising. There's changing privacy regulations, there's changing moves from big tech players. And all the time, advertisers, publishers, and ad tech players realize they're missing out on reaching valuable audiences in Safari and Firefox and other cookieless browsers. With this series of podcasts, we're looking at what's driving real results for publishers, for advertisers and brands and agencies, and also for ad tech players. And we're speaking to a range of companies about their identity strategies, what they've deployed, the results they've seen, the learnings they can share with the rest of the industry. We hope this will be useful for you in helping you plan your identity solutions and being able to navigate the ever-changing identity landscape. Today, we're joined by Peter Cunha, who is the Managing Director of Ad Management at Sovrn. Welcome, Peter.
Thanks, Joanna. Thanks for having me.
I think a lot of people don't realize just how significant Sovrn is, how big you are as a company. So could you give us a quick overview?
Sure. It's funny, the first 6 months I worked at Sovrn, my entire mandate was to go out to publishers and reintroduce ourselves. Because it seems that, most publishers, I think, know us as an ecosystem at large, know us as an ad exchange, which is a big part of our business. But we've made a series of acquisitions over the years that have, sort of added to our capabilities as a publisher platform. And so most recently, we acquired a company called Proper Media, which is now known as the Sovrn Ad Management product, which is the product that I'm heading up and the team I'm heading up. We also acquired a company called VigLink, which is now known as Sovrn Commerce. So we have a pretty large and sizable affiliate network that we operate. And we also acquired a first-party data management solution called OnScroll back in 2016. And so we've made a few acquisitions over the years, and we have a few more planned in the future. And so, yeah, we're adding more capability to the platform to, help publishers operate and better manage their business.
Great. And this is across multiple geos, multiple countries, right?
Yes. So we have a presence obviously here in the US, but UK and Europe as well, and a few other places.
You mentioned publishers, so let's dive right into that. How is Sovrn helping publishers future-proof their addressability strategy? Yeah,
so obviously we're not alone in that. We've been thinking about this for a long time. I think there's been one of those things that, with Google punting, the sort of deprecation of cookies further on down the road, seemingly on an annual basis at this point. It's not really done anybody any favors in terms of, kind of sort of pressing them on any urgency to kind of get behind some of these alternative solutions. We think about it in a very specific way. We really kind of look at the opportunity around providing publishers with more signals themselves to contribute more to the value chain in terms of quantifying the value of an ad opportunity. And we look at two specific camps in that. We look at audience and we look at inventory scoring. And so our efforts around signal have really been around empowering publishers with the ability to be able to broadcast those signals to the supply chain and optimize, for yield based off of those signals. And so we're really excited. We've had a lot of progress on the inventory side of the equation. We've really invested in attention as a metric to transact. So beyond viewability, diving in deeper into attention metrics and understanding the correlation between sort of brand and direct response performance and attention metrics, and kind of really building a new standard around that to allow for advertisers to buy based off of attention as opposed to just viewability alone. And so that's been a big focus for the team for the last couple of years. And this past year, we've really been delving into the audience component of that. And within that lane, we have probably one of the largest publisher data collectives globally, in that we have around 6,000 publishers included in this data collective. We see around about close to 500 million page views daily. And so it's a lot of data that we see that publishers sort of provide into the data collective, permissioned and licensed data that allow us to stitch together larger, more scalable audiences and deliver those back to publishers. And so the audience piece is and the audience strategy is taking shape right now. And we've really spent the last, I would say 18 months testing a variety of these strategies and these segments out in market with a small number of publishers here and there.
So what questions are the publishers asking you? Like, what are they asking you to solve for? What questions are publishers asking you to solve for with this?
Well, it's funny because it's our latest test was really about communicating the value to the publishers so that they understood exactly what we were doing, right? And so I think one of our latest trials and the case study we're launching with you guys at ID5 has really been about taking a very specific user attribute and linking it to a large portion of a publisher's traffic that they may not have ownership of themselves. And so, and this is the whole concept of the data collective. A publisher that has no footprint of hashed emails, how can they still participate in, the sort of the first party data activation strategy, right, around deterministic attributes of their audience? And so they work with a data collective, and we're able to link a large number of hashed emails to that publisher in order for them to then activate with their identity partners. And I think the results that we've seen from that test in particular kind of sort of exceeded our expectations. But the conversation with the publisher when we talk about this is like, oh, we want to link hashed emails we have in our data collective to a first party identifier that you can use to sort of promote liquidity of that first party identifier across the ecosystem. And the first answer that we get pretty much 90% of the time is, well, I don't have any hashed emails, so that's not going to work. And we have to always stop at that point and say, well, you don't need to have hashed emails. You work and you're a partner and you're opted into the Sovrn Data Collective, and therefore we have the ability to provide this for you. And so it always takes a little while for them to really understand sort of the broad strokes of what we're trying to do. But that was, in essence, kind of the first test that we put together around something very specific, right? And in an effort to tackle addressability. We've started already adding more signals to this feed that we provide publishers. And so, signals around intent, signals around, interest segments, signals around, other, deterministic attributes, and providing it directly to publishers so that they are then in control of how they go about representing their audience to the wider, ecosystem.
So you have access to all these different signals through your marketplace that you can activate across multiple publishers.
Right. So rather than transacting off of a Sovrn ID and coming out with, another ID, we're effectively giving the publisher access to all of those signals. And we're saying, hey, here's something about your audience that you maybe didn't know. And so we recommend, we have a use case for it. It's plug and play, activate it through Sovrn and with Sovrn and through this mechanism. And so it's really about, and it depends also on how sophisticated the publisher is as well. You've obviously got, sort of that sophistication curve across the ecosystem, and this is applicable to a certain subset, but the really encouraging thing is with this latest trial that we've had a really, really broad spectrum of publishers involved, in testing this out. Publishers who have DMPs and publishers who don't have DMPs, don't have any data infrastructure, and we've managed to go ahead and activate all of this on their behalf. So that was
going to be my next question, Peter. So is this something that works for all publishers? Does it matter on the size of the publisher? Does it, do they need to be niche? Does it matter if they're too niche?
No, so I think it's so from a scalability standpoint, to be a little bit more specific about sort of what we talk about or what we mean when we say scale. We managed to link a deterministic identifier to around about a quarter of a publisher's audience and footprint, which is significant, right? A double-digit percentage points in terms of how that publisher is then able to append that signal to their total inventory.
That's higher than the industry average.
Yeah, I mean, it's effectively, I think what we're leaning on is the scale of the Sovrn exchange to kind of really facilitate that. We've got a pretty big sort of identity graph, and so we're leaning on that to kind of really give us that advantage, alongside really promoting the incentives internally with publishers to license that data, that permission data with us as well, to make sure that we sort of provide the impetus for that flywheel as well.
So you've run these tests across all these publishers. Tell me about the results.
So we've run this last test across a little over a dozen or so publishers, and we've seen pretty consistent results across the board, where any ad request paired with a Sovrn hashed email drives a close to 100%, a 98% lift in effective CPM across the board. It's still early days in terms of us understanding exactly whether or not this is solely in sort of non-addressable environments, or whether or not it's a combination of the two. I think we have data that indicates that it's the latter. But that's been a really sort of encouraging data point that we've seen reflected across publishers of all different types, of all different sizes. And so it's really kind of, I think, demonstrative of the fact that the ecosystem is starting to key off of some of these signals in a more scalable way. So we're really encouraged by what we're seeing so far.
And what was the role of ID5 in the test?
Well, ID5 is essentially where the rubber meets the road for a lot of this, right? So being able, to have a partner successfully onboard a lot of these publishers. So we're providing the publisher with the raw material, but it's their responsibility with their identity partners to kind of really activate that within the different work streams that you make available. And so ID5 has been absolutely crucial in terms of sort of the troubleshooting and the onboarding process of really ensuring that publishers are providing all of these signals in a privacy compliant way within the encrypted workflows that you provide for all of these publishers. And so couldn't have done it without you guys.
And it's incredible to hear those big increases in CPM. And I understand you did a control as well. So this was you set the test up really well.
It was. We split the traffic into 3 groups, and this is, I think, this is what took us a while, because we've been testing this across the board and getting consistent reporting back from publisher partners, because we wanted to measure the impact not just on the Sovrn exchange, but we wanted to measure the impact across their entire ad stack. And so we were, in many ways, relying on the reporting that the publisher was providing back to us. And so, when we first started the test, we didn't have the right parameters in place. And this last, this last sort of, this last point of testing really focused around splitting the traffic up into 3 different parts. First was the control set, no hashed email linkage available, sort of regular traffic. That was group A. Group B was hashed email available and passed through to ID5. Group C was hashed email available, but let's hold it back and measure the impact between just knowing that there's a linkage and actually passing the linkage through to an identity partner. And so what we were seeing was that there was a pretty large sort of lift between groups A and C. So just knowing the fact that there is a linkage available for that user automatically, it indicates to the publisher that there's going to be a linkage that's leveraged at some point further down, sort of the ecosystem, right? We assume that if we have that linkage, that another partner will have that linkage at some point as well. And so that, partners will be able to transact on it. However, the difference between, or the delta between groups B and group C was close to 30%. And so 30% more valuable for a publisher to pass that hashed email through directly to their identity partners versus just knowing that there's a linkage available and expecting that, a brand is going to have that linkage at some point, further down the ecosystem and transact off of that. So, pretty black and white in terms of, the value of actually doing things a certain way, versus others. So the correlative versus causal impact was measured in that test.
And how did the publishers react?
Well, I think the publishers were more surprised. I think we were surprised at the lift. I mean, we had a lot of exchange related data going back. We started measuring the impact of universal IDs that we supported for the last 2, almost 3 years. And so we've been measuring the impact of that across our entire exchange traffic. And so we've been monitoring sort of the prevalence or ubiquity of certain IDs versus others, the impact of certain IDs versus others. And we, I think it blew our expectations out of the water based off of, the data that we'd had access to previously. And so we were surprised. The publishers were, I think, even more surprised at it. And I think for us right now, it's really understanding a little bit more about, okay, we've tested out this one signal. Let's go out and let's test more signals. And let's really start putting the publisher in a position of control in terms of how they go about representing their audience, in the broader ad ecosystem.
Okay, so let's talk about putting the publisher in control. What do you say to publishers who want to be able to get back some of the control that maybe they feel they've lost over the last few years?
Yeah, it's really the story of disintermediation for the publisher, right? So it's really, I think there are a lot of publishers that are skeptical of this whole concept of, all right, well, you're doing all of this linkage to my audience. I should be doing that. I should be representing that directly with the buyer. Why do I need partners in the middle and everything else? I think that's a very small or vocal sort of minority. I think most publishers understand the trade-off, right? Or not the trade-off, but they understand the need for collaboration across the entire supply chain, right? So, I think the way we're going about doing this is we're taking this product out to market, and this product is a usage-based pricing product that is not based off of a rev share. And so we're not planning on hijacking the transaction and collecting a rev share at the end of it and sort of really, sort of conforming to the way things have been done, for the last, couple of decades. I think our perspective is really, no, like our objective here is to empower the publisher with all of the signals that they might need to transact however which way they want. So if they would like to transact all of those signals with their identity partners. Absolutely, there's a prescribed workflow here. We've tested it out. It works really, really well. If you want to transact all of this directly with the marketer or directly with a brand or an agency, absolutely. Like that's actually one of the next few, sort of iterations of the product that we want to try, that we want to test out is ultimately understanding, okay, how can this drive marketer outcomes in a direct publisher to marketer relationship? And so we want to promote that flexibility, which is ultimately how we define control, right? It's like if you give the publisher the raw materials of how to know their audience better in specific terms and provide them with that log level data, not just say know your audience and I'm going to tell you, this KPI over here that might mean something to my marketplace but doesn't mean anything to you. It's really all about promoting the liquidity of their first party ID and making sure that they have access to all of those insights that they can use to further power their businesses in a myriad of different ways.
And how do they react? Does that then make them want to collect more first party data? Do they have the ability to do that? Does it?
I think it shows the opportunity around it, right? It's basically saying, look, even if you don't have a direct sales team and you don't have that sort of engagement directly with the brand, there are other ways for you to go about evangelizing and activating on first party data. And I think that's really kind of the mission that we've set out to solving is really helping be a partner with partnering with publishers to enable some of these use cases, whereas they may not have been available to those publishers before.
And do you want to widen it out to more than just the 12 publishers?
Yes. I think there's a lot that we want to learn around how buyers are activating off of these signals, how buyers are using this to optimize their bidding strategies across the board. And so we've been, the latter phase of this trial, we've really been engaging with marketers a little bit more and DSPs a little bit more directly around, okay, how do we scale this and sort of help you achieve your objectives? Because I think while the results were really, really encouraging, I think we're just scratching the surface in terms of the potential around, how this can be used in more scalable ways. I mean, we were, I think retrofitting our solution to work within an existing work stream, which is great. It's fantastic. But what are some of the new opportunities that can be opened up now with a more scalable set? So the priority is really to expand on the supply side. Our priority is also automating this right now, because the version of this product at the moment is something that requires a lot of heavy lifting from the publisher as well. And so we have we have some understanding around that. But so making it more scalable, making it automated, and ultimately engaging marketers more directly, I think is are some of the priorities right now.
And can you make this more scalable? Is that process underway?
We have a lot of ideas around that. Where the process is underway, but we're really testing right now.
Okay, and then what's the reaction from the buy side? So you want to build these deeper relationships, gather more feedback, but what's the initial feedback?
Well, the initial feedback for them is really not starting from scratch, right? So a lot of brands, a lot of marketers have made a lot of these investments already with other partnerships and workflows specifically. So the conversations that we've been having with marketers in general have really been around, okay, how can we make this fit into our existing work streams? And so most of the conversations have kind of really revolved around that particular piece. And so, but we're encouraged we're having more and more conversations, and we're getting, I think, inbound as well from advertisers who heard about, what we're doing. And so in that sense, it's been really, really encouraging. And I don't think we'll be in the same place a year from today. I think we're starting to have those conversations where I think buyers, marketers are starting to understand the opportunity around a more scalable segment of publishers with authenticated users and are open to coming to the table with some ideas of their own.
I think that's important, Peter, because I think half the time with this kind of conversation, we're looking at how we can make the existing landscape better, work within the established boundaries and just get better performance. But there's a real opportunity to create things in a new way, like back to the drawing board.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think that's when we started this call talking about Google's, kicking the can down the road. And I think that really hasn't helped anybody. It hasn't created any sort of sense of urgency on both supply and buy side to kind of really think through the opportunity that way. I think there are plenty of really, really good ideas. There's an understanding that, browsers are going to play a role, publishers are going to play a role, ad tech in the middle is going to play a role, and then, buyers are going to play a role. But there seem to be too many things going on right now and too many vested interests in each constituency wanting to do things a specific way. And so I think that'll start getting whittled down a little bit.
Yeah, what do you predict? What sort of bright spots? What do you see, especially for publishers?
Always weary about making predictions around any of this stuff. I think it's going to be really interesting to see where publishers gravitate to. I think there's been some of the recent data that we've looked at least, we've seen a pretty significant uptick in universal IDs and adoption of universal IDs over the last few months. And so I think that's really interesting because that's been contrary to what I've heard on the conference circuit. Mm-hmm. So that's quite relevant, I would say. And then I think we're starting to see marketers lean in a little bit more as well. Like we talk about the need for a publisher to have more control. I think marketers are wanting to have a little bit more control in the conversation as well. So we're starting to see some of those partners lean in a little bit more. And so I think I'm hoping that at least, when it comes down to end of 22 and 2023, I'm hoping that we get the type of industry collaboration that we've really been looking for, for the last, sort of 2 or 3 years, that has happened, but it's happened very slowly. And I think we might see an acceleration moving into 2023 on that front.
Great. So you have these learnings, you've done these tests, you've done a control group, you've seen the benefit of first-party data, you've been able to enable second-party data, you've been able to drive results for the publishers. You say you want to expand the tests, you want to work with more marketers, look at new opportunities. How can you keep moving this conversation forward? What's next? How can you share these learnings with both internally and also for the wider industry?
A lot of our efforts, I think, right now are around repeatability and scalability. And so, I mentioned that, the approach is probably not the most scalable for long tail publishers. Understanding how to automate some of what we put together on behalf of long tail publishers that might not have the data infrastructure that's needed in order to transact in this way is near the top of the list. And then ultimately, how do we make it really easy for publishers to report on that performance as well? How do we make it clear, kind of sort of what's happening, when it's happening? How can we make it dynamic so that publishers can start leveraging these signals in different ways? And ultimately, how do we move the product forward so that we can start tackling, inventory scoring and audience, which typically have been siloed in our approach today, but how can we sort of start moving those two pieces together and providing the publisher with that ultimate understanding of, all right, I have to think through inventory, score and inventory quality, in combination or, in concert with how I broadcast certain attributes of that audience out to the wider, value chain. So there's a lot on the product side that we've been talking through. I think it starts with learning, it then followed by scalability and automation. And I think at the end of it all, it's really about bringing, publisher and buyer together at the end of the day, and making sure that we're all operating off of the same information. I think that's pretty important to us.
Yeah, so you need to drive that scalability and that operational efficiency, but do you have a good dialogue with your customers? What's your advice to your long tail publishers in this scenario?
Well, I think the advice is, don't get too bogged down on sort of the day-to-day operations of how things are happening right now. Invest for the future and make sure that you have, a seat at the table and you're participating, like no matter how small you are. Talk to your partners, talk about, learn about some of these new, techniques for audience activation, and look at these new ways of that marketers are buying, and start leaning into some of those partnerships a little bit more. I think some of those publishers that were maybe the first to test some of these solutions, back a couple of years ago, didn't see that sort of hockey stick, that they expected from some of these solutions. And I think to expect that hockey stick is it's neither here nor there. It's really, I think it's really about sort of this long-term engagement with and collaboration with your partners around uncovering some of the opportunities that you have in front of you.
I think, we can all get very tactical sometimes, can't we? But what you're saying here is think about how you're laying the groundwork for future benefits.
100%.
And would you give the same advice to the rest of the advertising industry? What would be your request of the overall ad tech industry for the next 6 months or so?
Yeah, I think we're seeing a lot of the stuff that we've wanted to see, for the last couple of years. So really kind of sort of having marketers lean in a little bit more, ask more questions around how the sausage is made, so to speak, right? But we're starting to see a lot of that. And so I think it's just more of that. I would love to see more curiosity, right? Love to see more collaboration. Also, I would love to see publishers not think that everybody's coming in to, kind of sort of repurpose their audience to, and I understand why, there's a certain amount of, cynicism across the industry because of how the entire third-party ecosystem has evolved over the last couple of decades. So some of that skepticism is warranted, but I think, who your partners are that represent your best interests at heart. So lean into those partnerships. You don't have to necessarily lean into all of them, but pick your partners, invest in those relationships, and position yourself in the best way moving forward.
So pick your partners, less cynicism, more curiosity, more collaboration.
100%.
Sounds like great advice, Peter. Look, I really want to thank you. Thank you for sharing your insights. Thank you for talking us through the tests you've been doing and the results that you've had from the tests. And thank you very much for joining the ID5 podcast.
Thank you, Joanna. Thank you to ID5 for partnering on all of it. It's been great. We're really excited about the future.